Thomas John Tom Thomson was an influential Canadian artist of the early 20th century. He directly influenced a group of Canadian painters that would come to be known as the Group of Seven, and though he died before they formally formed, he is sometimes incorrectly credited as being a member of the group itself. Thomson died under mysterious circumstances. Personal life: Thomas John Tom Thomson was born near Claremont, Ontario to John and Margaret Thomson and grew up in Leith, Ontario, near Owen Sound. In 1899, he entered a machine shop apprenticeship at an iron foundry owned by William Kennedy, a close friend of his father. He was fired from his apprenticeship by a foreman who complained of Thomson's habitual tardiness. Also in 1899, he volunteered to fight in the Second Boer War, but was turned down because of a medical condition. Thomson was reputed to have been refused entry into the Canadian Expeditionary Force for service in the First World War also. He served as a fire ranger in Algonquin Park during this time. In 1901, he enrolled in a business college in Chatham, Ontario, but dropped out 8 months later to join his older brother, George Thomson, who was operating a business school in Seattle. There he met and had a brief summer romance with Alice Eleanor Lambert. In 1904, he returned to Canada, and may have studied with William Cruikshank, 1905–1906. In 1907, Thomson joined Grip Limited, an artistic design firm in Toronto, where many of the future members of the Group of Seven also worked. Thomson first visited Algonquin Park in 1912. Thereafter he often travelled around Ontario with his colleagues, especially to the wilderness of Ontario, which was to be a major source of inspiration for him. In 1912 he began working, along with other artists who would go on to form the Group of Seven after his death, at Roos and Mann Press, but left the following year to work as a full-time artist. He first exhibited with the Ontario Society of Artists in 1913, and became a member the following year. He would continue to exhibit with the Ontario Society until his death. In 1914 the National Gallery of Canada began acquiring his paintings, which signalled a turning point in Thomson's career. For several years he shared a studio and living quarters with fellow artists. Beginning in 1914 he worked intermittently as a firefighter, ranger, and guide in Algonquin Park, but found that such work did not allow enough time for painting. During the next 3 years, he produced many of his most famous works, including the Jack Pine, the West Wind and the Northern River. Paintings. Art and technique. Thomson was largely self-taught. He was employed as a graphic designer with Toronto's Grip Limited, an experience which honed his draftsmanship. Although he began painting and drawing at an early age, it was only in 1912, when Thomson was well into his 30s, that he began to paint seriously. His first trips to Algonquin Park inspired him to follow the lead of fellow artists in producing oil sketches of natural scenes on small, rectangular panels for easy portability while traveling. Between 1912 and his death in 1917, Thomson produced hundreds of these small sketches, many of which are now considered works in their own right, and are housed in such galleries as the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto and the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. Many of Thomson's major paintings, including Northern River, the Jack Pine, and the West Wind, began as sketches before being expanded into large oil paintings at Thomson's studio, an old utility shack with a wood-burning stove on the grounds of the studio building, an artist's enclave in Rosedale, Toronto. Although Thomson sold few of these paintings during his lifetime, they formed the basis of posthumous exhibitions, including one at Wembley in London, that eventually brought international attention to his work. Thomson peaked creatively between 1914 and 1917. He was aided by the patronage of Toronto physician James McCallum, who enabled Thomson's transition from graphic designer to professional painter. Although the Group of Seven was not founded until after Thomson's death, his work is sympathetic to that of group members A.Y. Jackson, Frederick Varley, and Arthur Lismer. These artists shared an appreciation for rugged, unkempt natural scenery, and all used broad brushstrokes and a liberal application of paint to capture the stark beauty and vibrant color of the Ontario landscape. Thomson's art bears some stylistic resemblance to the work of European post-impressionists such as Vincent van Gogh and Paul Klee. Copyright Cézanne, whose work he may have known from books or visits to art galleries. Other key influences were the Art Nouveau and arts and crafts movements of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, styles with which he would have been familiar from his work in the graphic arts. Described as having an idiosyncratic palette, Thomson's control of color was exceptional. He often mixed available pigments to create unusual, new colors, making his distinctive palette along with his brushwork instantly recognizable regardless of the subject of his work. For artist and Thomson biographer Harold Town, the brevity of Thomson's career hinted at an artistic evolution never fully realized. He cites the oil painting Unfinished Sketch as the first completely abstract work in Canadian art, a painting that, whether or not it was intended as a purely non-objective work, presages the innovations of abstract expressionism. Death: Thomson disappeared during a canoeing trip on Canoe Lake in Algonquin Park on July 8, 1917, and his body was discovered in the lake 8 days later. Contradictory descriptions of Thomson's corpse have been produced. Thomson's body was examined by Dr. Goldwyn Howland, who concluded the official cause of death was drowning. The coroner, Dr. Arthur E. Ranney, M.D., concluded that the drowning was accidental. The body was interred in Mowat Cemetery, near Canoe Lake, the day after his body was discovered. Under the direction of his older brother, George Thomson, the body was exhumed 2 days later and reinterred in the family plot beside the Leith Presbyterian Church on July 21. In 1935, Blodin Davis published the first exploration of Thomson's death outside of newspaper accounts from the time of Thomson's death. As this was a self-published edition of 500 copies, her doubts about the official decision of cause of death did not receive wide attention. A version of her text, edited by A.Y. Jackson, was published posthumously in 1967. In 1970, Judge William Little's book, The Thomson Mystery, recounted how in 1956 Little and 3 friends dug up Thomson's original gravesite, in Mowat Cemetery on Canoe Lake. They believed that the remains they found were Thomson's. In the fall of 1956, medical investigators determined that the body was that of an unidentified Aboriginal. Since the publication of the Thomson Mystery, theories have proliferated regarding Thomson's cause of death, including suicide and murder. Proponents of these theories suggest that Thomson may have committed suicide over a woman who holidayed at Canoe Lake being pregnant with his child, or out of despondence over his lack of artistic recognition. Others have suggested that Thomson was in a fatal fight with one of 2 men who were living at Canoe Lake, or killed by poachers in the park. In 2007, the Great Unsolved Mysteries in Canadian History project launched Death on a Painted Lake, The Thomson Tragedy, a book-length, bilingual website featuring a selection of over 50 transcribed primary and secondary documents related to Thomson's death, including documents never before made public, such as Blodin Davis' 1931 request to the Ontario Attorney General for opening of Thomson's Algonquin Park burial site. Utilizing, in part, the Great Unsolved Mysteries site transcriptions, Canadian newspaper columnist Roy McGregor has described his 2009 examination of records of the 1956 remains unearthed by William Little and concluded that the body was actually Thomson's, indicating that Thomson never left Canoe Lake. In an essay entitled, The Many Deaths of Thomson, published in 2011, Gregory Klidges describes how testimony and theories regarding Thomson's death have evolved since 1917. Assessing the secondary accounts against the primary evidence, Klidges concludes that Thomson's death is consistent with the official assessment of accidental drowning. Historians Kathleen Garay and Chrysel Verdun state, Klidges' forensic archival sleuthing does provide for the first time some degree of certainty regarding this event. Legacy and influence. Since his death, Thomson's work has grown in value and popularity. In 2002, the National Gallery of Canada staged a major exhibition of his work, giving Thomson the same level of prominence afforded Picasso, Renoir, and the Group of 7 in previous years. In recent decades, the increased value of Thomson's work has led to the discovery of numerous forgeries of his work on the market. In September 1917, the artists James E. H. MacDonald and John W. Beatty, assisted by area residents, erected a memorial cairn at Hayhurst Point on Canoe Lake, where Thomson died. The cost was paid by McCallum. It can be accessed by boat. In the summer of 2004, another historical marker honouring Thomson was moved from its previous location nearer the centre of Leith to the graveyard in which Thomson is now buried. In 1967, the Tom Thomson Art Gallery opened in Owen Sound. Numerous examples of his work are also on display at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Clinburg, Ontario. Thomson's influence can be seen in the work of later Canadian artists, including Emily Carr, Goodridge Roberts, Harold Town, and Joyce Wieland. During the 1970s, Joyce Wieland based a movie on the life and death of Tom Thomson. Journalist Roy McGregor's 1980 novel Shorelines is a fictional interpretation of Thomson's death. Neil Lato's Algonquin Elegy is an historical fiction focusing on Thomson's death. Several songs reference Thomson's death, Alex Sinclair's Tom Thomson, and the Tragically Hip's Three Pistols have also been recorded. Several books of poetry inspired by Thomson have also been published. George Whipple's Tom Thomson and Other Poems, Troy Jollamore's Tom Thomson in Purgatory, and Kevin Irie, Viewing Tom Thomson, A Minority Report. In 2011, artist George A. Walker created The Mysterious Death of Tom Thomson, a wordless narrative told in 109 wood engravings. On May 3, 1990, Canada Post issued The West Wind, Tom Thomson, 1,917 feet in the Masterpieces of Canadian Art series. The stamp was designed by Pierre-Yves Pelletier based on an oil painting The West Wind, by Thomas John Thomson in the Art Gallery of Ontario, Toronto, Ontario. The 50-cent stamps are perforated 13x13.5 and were printed by Ashton Potter Limited. Citations. Further reading, books on Thomson's art include the 1977 The Silence and the Storm by Harold Town and David Silcox, and several short coffee table books by former Art Gallery of Ontario curator, Joan Murray. The 2002 book, Tom Thomson, created to accompany the National Gallery of Canada and Art Gallery of Ontario exhibition of Thomson's work, ranks as the most in-depth survey of Thomson's oeuvre. Boulet, Roger. The Canadian Earth and Tom Thomson. M. Bernard Lote Cerebras Publishing, 1982. National Library of Canada, Amicus No. 2894383, Davis, Blodin. Paddle and Pallet, The Story of Tom Thomson, Toronto, Ontario, Ryerson Press, 1930. Davis, Blodin. A Study of Tom Thomson, The Story of a Man Who Looked for Beauty and for Truth in the Wilderness, Discus Press, 1935. Rep Mitchell Press, 1967. Grace, Cheryl. Inventing Tom Thomson, Vancouver, British Columbia, University of British Columbia Press, 2004. Klidges, Gregory. The Many Deaths of Tom Thomson, Archival Narratives for Canada, Retelling Stories in a Changing Landscape, Christine Garay and Chrysel Verduin, eds., Blackpoint, NS, Fenwood Press, 2011, pages 274-297. ISBN 9781552664469, Klidges, Gregory. The Many Deaths of Tom Thomson, Separating Fact from Fiction, Toronto, Doonduran, forthcoming spring 2016. Lato, Neil J., Algonquin Elegy, Tom Thomson's Last Spring, Lincoln, Nebraska, iUniverse, 2005. ISBN 9780595361328, Little, William T. The Tom Thomson Mystery. Toronto, McGraw-Hill Ryerson, 1970. ISBN 0-07-092655-7, Littlefield, Angie. The Thomsons of Durham, Tom Thomson's Family Heritage. Self-published. McGregor, Roy, Northern Light, The Enduring Mystery of Tom Thomson and the Woman Who Loved Him, Toronto, Random House, ISBN 9780307357397, Murray, Joan. Tom Thomson, The Last Spring. Toronto, Doon-Duran, 1994. Murray, Joan. Tom Thomson, Design for a Canadian Hero. Toronto, Doon-Duran, 1998. Murray, Joan. A Treasury of Tom Thomson. Toronto, Douglas and McIntyre, 2012. Polling, Jim Sr. Tom Thomson, The Life and Mysterious Death of the Famous Canadian Painter. Altitude Publishing, 2003. Robson, A. H. Tom Thomson 1937. Silcox, David. Tom Thomson, An Introduction to His Life and Art. Firefly Books, 2002. Silcox, David. The Group of Seven and Tom Thomson. Firefly Books, 2011. Tom Thomson. Reed, Dennis, ed. Toronto, Ontario, Art Gallery of Ontario, 2002. Town, Harold and Silcox, David P. The Silence and the Storm. Toronto, McClellan and Stewart, 1977. Anniversary edition forthcoming 2016. External links, Silcox, David P. Tom Thomson, Life and Work. Art Canada Institute. 2015. http, The Canadian Encyclopedia Comte Tom Thomson Joan Murray. Tom Thomson. The Canadian Encyclopedia 2013. http, www.tomthomson.org The Tom Thomson Memorial Gallery, http, Archive CBC Carts Entertainment CBC television program about Thomson's painting, The Jack Pine 1968. http, Archive CBC Kane This DAYTWT CBC A Euro Front Page Challenge clip on Tom Thomson's death. 1970. https, www.nfb Coist short film about Thomson's life and art, directed by Graham McInnes for the National Film Board of Canada. 1944. http, www.biography Car Show Bio Asp. Bio = 41859 Tom Thomson. Biography at the Dictionary of Canadian Biography Online. Volume 14. http, www.tomthomson Car West Wind. The Vision of Tom Thomson 2012. Award-winning documentary, http, algonquinology.com Neil Lato, Algonquinology. Essays related to Thomson's death. Blog, http, www.Group of Seven Car Natural Genius McMichael Story ASPX The Legacy of the Group of Seven Tom Thomson's Life Art and Special Gifts.